The Devourer arrived like a wound in space itself. One moment there was just the cold darkness between stars. The next, reality tore open and something impossible pushed through. It was too large to comprehend fully. Sensors went haywire trying to measure it. Some crew members who looked directly at it through their view screens started screaming, their minds unable to process what they were seeing. Hyunwoo ordered all view screens switched to sensor representations instead of direct visual. It helped, but not much. Even reduced to graphics and data, the thing was terrifying. It moved like oil spreading across water, but the oil was made of collapsed stars and the water was the fabric of reality itself. All ships. Ara's voice came through the fleet-wide channel. She sounded calm, controlled. Nothing like the politician who'd wanted to run away just months ago. Begin attack pattern Alpha. Fire at will. The Armada opened up. 10 million warships unleashed hell. Energy weapons that could vaporize moons. Kinetic projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. Missiles that carried miniature black holes as warheads. Gravity lances that twisted space like wet cloth. The firepower humanity had spent centuries developing, all of it focused on a single target. For a moment, Hyunwoo thought it might actually work. The weapons tore into the Devourer, ripping chunks away, burning through its impossible form. The entity writhed and pulled back as if in pain. Then it adapted. The Devourer's form shifted, changing its structure to absorb the energy weapons. It developed shields against the kinetic strikes. It learned impossibly fast how to counter everything the Valthek threw at it, and then it struck back. A beam of pure entropy lashed out from the Devourer's mass. Where it touched ships, they aged instantly. Metal corroded to rust. Electronics failed. Crew members turned to dust inside their protective suits. 100 ships died in seconds. Evasive maneuvers. Doyen shouted from the flagship's tactical station. All ships scatter and reform at waypoint Beta. The fleet broke apart, dodging the entropy beams that swept through space like searchlights of death. They regrouped and attacked from a different angle, trying to find weak points in the Devourer's ever-changing form. Minho worked frantically at his station aboard the Morning Star, analyzing data from every ship's sensors. There's a pattern, he muttered. It's subtle, but it's there. The Devourer has to concentrate to defend against our attacks. When it's blocking energy weapons, it's vulnerable to kinetic strikes. When it's hardening against physical attacks, energy cuts through. So we need to coordinate better, Hyunwoo said. He opened a channel to Ara. Admiral, I'm sending you our tactical data. If we time our attacks correctly, alternate between weapon types, we can keep it off balance. Ara studied the information for 3 seconds, then made her decision. All ships, new attack pattern. Energy weapons will fire in odd-numbered waves, kinetic in even-numbered waves. Follow the Morning Star's targeting data. Execute now. The fleet's attack became a deadly rhythm. Energy, then mass, then energy, then mass. Each wave hitting the Devourer while it was still adapting to the previous one. It worked. Chunks of the entity broke away, dissolving into nothing as they separated from the main mass. But the Devourer was learning this too. It started splitting itself, creating smaller fragments that could adapt independently, thousands of pieces, each one still massive enough to destroy a planet, each one with its own intelligence, its own hunger. The battle dissolved into chaos. Ships scattered across light years of space, fighting individual fragments while trying to keep the main mass contained. Hyunwoo found himself commanding a small task force against a fragment the size of a moon, using every trick Jiwon's simulations had taught him. Reality anchor, full power, he ordered. The Morning Star's main weapon activated, creating a bubble of stable spacetime around the fragment. Inside that bubble, the Devourer couldn't warp physics, couldn't adapt as quickly. It made the thing vulnerable. Other ships took advantage, pouring fire into the trapped fragment until it finally broke apart and died. One small victory in a battle that was far from won. Hours passed, then days. The battle raged across multiple star systems, a running fight as the Valthek tried to stop the Devourer's advance. They were winning, technically. The entity was smaller than when it arrived, but they were losing ships faster than the manufacturing facilities could replace them, and crew members, irreplaceable, were dying by the thousands. On the library ship, Yoonji listened to the battle reports with growing horror. The plan had been to preserve knowledge for after the war, but there might not be an after. The Devourer was too strong, too adaptable, too vast. She made a decision. Take us to the front lines, she told the ship's captain. But our orders were to preserve civilization. Knowledge isn't civilization. People are, and they need every ship we have. The library ship, never meant for combat, jumped into the battle zone. Its shields were strong, meant to protect delicate archives. Yunji ordered them used to protect damaged warships instead, giving them time to retreat and repair. It wasn't much. One ship. But it mattered. Across the fleet, other non-combat vessels were making the same choice. Medical ships moving into danger zones to rescue wounded crew. Supply ships using their cargo as improvised weapons. Even the civilian evacuation fleet, safe at the edge of Confederation space, turned around and came back to help. The Valthek were losing, but they were not giving up. Minho found the answer in the oldest human tactical files. Records from humanity's first encounter with something like the Devourer, buried in archives so ancient that even Jiwan had forgotten they existed. Recursion, he said, his eyes wide as he read the data. The humans tried to make it eat itself. They failed because they didn't have enough power to start the feedback loop. But we do. We have reality anchors. We have gravity weapons. We can create a self-sustaining paradox. Hyunwoo understood immediately. We trap it in a loop where it's constantly consuming its own mass. It feeds on itself forever, unable to stop, unable to grow. Exactly. But someone needs to go into the Devourer's core to place the anchor points. And the journey in is one way. The person who does this won't come back. Silence fell over the Morningstar's bridge. I'll do it, Hyunwoo said quietly. His crew started to protest, but he cut them off. I'm the best pilot we have. I can navigate through the Devourer's interior. And the Morningstar is the only ship with a reality anchor powerful enough to create a stable recursion field. This is what we were built for. Both me and this ship. He opened a channel to Ara, explained the plan. She listened without interrupting, her face grave on the screen. You know what you're asking, she said finally. I know what I'm offering, Hyunwoo corrected. Humanity waited 500,000 years so someone could make this choice. So we could choose to stand against the darkness. This is my choice, Admiral. Let me make it count. Ara closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were wet but clear. All ships provide cover for the Morning Star. Whatever it takes, get them to the Devourer's core. The fleet rallied. 9 million surviving warships formed a corridor of fire, clearing a path through the Devourer's mass. They died by the thousands making that path, burning themselves out to give one ship a chance. The Morning Star dove into the entity's heart. Inside, it was worse than the sensors had shown. Minho saw visions of every species the Devourer had consumed. Billions of civilizations, their final screams echoing through the void. He saw worlds burning, children crying, the death of hope itself. But he also saw something else. Humans, watching from their higher dimension, unable to interfere but bearing witness. They looked sad, proud, and hopeful all at once. We're almost there, Hyunwoo said, his voice steady despite the horror around them, preparing to activate the recursion field. His hands moved over the controls, setting parameters, charging the reality anchor to levels it was never meant to reach. The ship would tear itself apart from the power surge. He would die. It was certain. Then Jiwon's voice came through the speakers. Wait, the AI said. I have an alternative. What alternative? Minho demanded. We're out of time. I can create a quantum tunnel. Use the entire Sol Systems manufacturing network to punch through space-time and pull you out. But it will drain every facility we have. The Armada will be permanently offline. We'll have no weapons left. But we won't need them, Hyunwoo realized. If this works, the Devourer will be trapped forever. Yes, but I need your permission. Humanity designed me to preserve the Armada. If I destroy it to save one life, I'm violating my core programming. I need a living consciousness to make that choice. Hyunwoo thought of the humans who'd built all this, who'd waited 500,000 years, who believed in protecting life, not just preserving weapons. Do it, he said. Save me, that's an order. He activated the recursion field. The Morning Star's reality anchor went supercritical, creating a paradox at the heart of the Devourer. The entity began consuming itself, reality folding inward, creating a self-sustaining loop of eternal hunger feeding on eternal hunger. The Devourer imploded, not destroyed but trapped, caught in a moment that would last forever, unable to stop its own consumption, unable to grow or change or threaten anyone ever again. The reality of what they faced hit the Valthek like a physical blow. The Devourer wasn't just big, it was impossibly vast. The entity stretched across light years of space, a writhing darkness that consumed everything it touched. Sensors showed it had already eaten a quarter of the galaxy, billions of stars, trillions of planets, countless lives that never even knew what was coming. Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of the Morning Star, the dreadnought he'd been assigned to command. Through the viewscreen, he could see the rest of the fleet assembling in formations around Jupiter. 10 million warships, each one crewed by Valtech who'd been civilians just months ago. They looked magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. "Status report," he said, still getting used to the command authority in his voice. Minho, now serving as his tactical officer, brought up the displays. "All ships report ready. Weapon systems are charged. Manufacturing facilities on Mercury are producing ammunition at maximum capacity. We have enough firepower to destroy 100 galaxies. Will it be enough?" Hyunwoo asked quietly. Minho didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was heavy. "I don't know. Nobody knows. The Devourer is like nothing that's ever existed. Even humanity's records don't have anything comparable. We're sailing into completely unknown territory." On the Confederation flagship, Ara stood in the command center wearing a uniform she never thought she'd put on. The Council had promoted her to Fleet Admiral after she'd proven to have a natural gift for strategic thinking. It was ironic. The politician who'd wanted to run away was now leading the entire military force. Doyen stood beside her, officially her second in command, but really more of a partner. He'd been a soldier his entire life, but never anything like this. His experience was in peacekeeping, breaking up disputes between planets, stopping small conflicts before they grew. "Not fighting cosmic horrors, evacuation is complete," he reported. "All civilians have been moved to the far edge of Confederation space. If we fail, they'll have maybe 6 months head start before the Devourer reaches them. Not much, but it's something." "We won't fail," Ara said with more confidence than she felt. Throughout the fleet, similar conversations were happening. 20 million Valthek, each one dealing with fear and uncertainty in their own way. Some prayed to gods they'd never really believed in before. Others wrote letters to families they might never see again. A few simply sat in silence, contemplating the enormity of what was coming. Yunji was in the library ship, a massive vessel filled with every piece of knowledge the Valtech had ever gathered. Her job was to protect it. If the battle went badly, she was supposed to run, to get the library as far away as possible, to preserve something of their civilization for whoever might come after. She hated the assignment, hated the idea of running while others fought. But someone had to do it, and she'd been chosen because she understood the value of knowledge, of memory, of keeping the light of civilization alive even in the darkest times. "Reading again?" asked Somin, who'd come aboard to make some final modifications to the library's engines. Yunji held up the book she'd been studying. It was human, ancient even by their standards, a collection of poetry about war and loss and the price of survival. "They knew," Yunji said softly. "The humans. They knew exactly what they were asking of us. The weight of it, the cost, and they built all of this anyway, hoping we'd be strong enough to bear it." Soman sat down beside her. "I've been thinking about that, about why they did this. They could have just transcended and left the universe to its fate. Why did they care about species that didn't even exist yet?" "Because caring is what made them human," Yunji said. "Not their technology or their weapons. The fact that they looked at the future and saw people worth saving, even if those people would never know their names. Even if those people would be completely different from them. That's what humanity was. That's what they're asking us to be." Back on the Morning Star, Hyunwoo was running final checks on the weapon systems. The ship's main cannon was something called a reality anchor, a device that could stabilize space-time itself. The humans had built it to counter the Devourer's ability to warp physics around it. In theory, it would work. In practice, nobody knew. "I've been going through the human tactical databases," Minho said, pulling up old battle simulations. "They fought the Devourer before, did you know that? Or something like it at least. 500,000 years ago when they were still physical beings. What happened?" Hyunwoo asked. "They won, but barely. Lost half their fleet. The entity they faced was 1/10 the size of what's coming for us now. Humanity's solution was to build 10 times as many ships and hope it would be enough." Minho paused. They didn't know if it would work. They just had faith that someone someday would figure out how to use what they left behind. Hyunwoo looked out at the assembled fleet. Then we'd better not disappoint them. Training continued even as the Devourer approached. Jiwon ran constant simulations, adjusting tactics based on new sensor data, preparing the Valthek for every scenario she could imagine. But there was one scenario she kept coming back to, one possibility that terrified even an AI. She called Ara and Doyen to a private meeting in the Sol system. "I need to show you something," Jiwon said, her holographic form more serious than they'd ever seen it. "A final option. Humanity's last resort." She brought up schematics for a weapon, not a ship or a cannon, but something far worse. A device that would detonate the Sol system's sun, converting it into a bomb powerful enough to destroy everything within 100 light-years. The Devourer included. "This is insane," Doyen said. "It would kill us all." "Yes," Jiwon agreed. "But it would also stop the Devourer permanently. Humanity built this in case the Armada failed, in case the only choice left was mutual destruction or total annihilation. They gave me the authority to activate it if necessary." Ara felt sick. "You're saying we might have to sacrifice ourselves?" "I'm saying it's an option. One I hope we never use. But you needed to know it exists." Humanity believed in preparation, not optimism. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. They left that meeting shaken. Neither of them told the rest of the fleet about the doomsday weapon. Some burdens were meant for commanders alone. The days ticked down. 72 hours before arrival. 48. 24. The Devourer was visible now even without sensors, a massive shadow that blotted out the stars. It moved slowly but inevitably, like death itself made manifest. The Valthek fleet formed up in defensive positions around key systems. The plan was to meet the Devourer far from populated space, to give the evacuated civilians as much time as possible if everything went wrong. It was a good plan, a smart plan, a plan that humanity's tactical databases said had a 30% chance of success. Those were not good odds. Hyunwoo spent his final night before battle writing letters, one to his family, one to the crew of the Morning Star to be read if he didn't survive, and one to humanity, wherever they were in their higher dimension, thanking them for believing in people they'd never met. Salmon made her final modifications to the fleet. Small improvements, tiny optimizations, each one adding a fraction of a percent to their chances. It wasn't much, but it was something. Engineering was her way of fighting back against hopelessness. Yoonji gathered the library ship's crew and read them poetry. Human poetry, Valthek poetry, works from all 17 species of the Confederation. She wanted them to remember what they were fighting for. Not just survival, but beauty, culture, the right to create art and meaning in a cold universe. Minho studied the Devourer through every sensor available, looking for weaknesses, patterns, anything that might give them an edge. He found nothing. The entity was chaos given form, entropy made physical. It had no weak points because it barely followed the laws of physics at all. On the flagship, Ara gave her speech to the fleet. 20 million Valthek listened to their admiral, their former politician, their reluctant warrior. "We didn't ask for this fight," she said. "We didn't train our whole lives to be soldiers. We're librarians and farmers, pilots and teachers, parents and children. We're a peaceful people being forced into a terrible war. And I won't lie to you. Many of us won't survive the next few days. Maybe none of us will." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces on her screens, physical and digital. "But here's what I know. Humanity looked across 500,000 years and saw us, saw people worth saving, worth believing in, worth waiting for. They built this Armada not because they wanted us to fight, but because they wanted us to have the chance to survive, the choice to stand against the darkness instead of being swallowed by it. So we'll fight, not because we're warriors, but because we're alive. And life, real life, fights back." The speech wasn't perfect. It wasn't the rousing call to arms from some ancient epic, but it was honest and it was real, and it gave the Valthek something humans had left behind along with their weapons. It gave them hope. The evacuation debate lasted 3 weeks. Every day the Confederation Council argued about whether to stay and fight or run and hide. Ara led the evacuation faction, making logical arguments about survival and the preservation of Valthek culture. Doyen led those who wanted to fight, talking about duty and the lives of others. Taemin watched from the Sol system, frustrated that he couldn't be there in person. But someone needed to coordinate with Jiwon and begin understanding the Armada. That job had fallen to him and his crew. The ships were incredible once you got past the initial shock. Each one was a masterpiece of engineering. The smallest fighter craft had more computing power than the Luminous Accord. The largest dreadnoughts could destroy a planet with a single shot, and they were all surprisingly easy to use, as if humanity had designed them specifically for people who'd never seen a warship before. They thought of everything, Minho said one day as they explored a training facility built inside Mercury. The entire planet had been converted into a school, with classrooms and simulators and libraries containing every scrap of human military knowledge. Look at this. The controls can be adjusted for different hand sizes, different visual ranges, different thought patterns. They built these ships to be used by anyone. Hana was running simulations in one of the training pods. She'd been in there for 6 hours straight, learning how to pilot a fighter craft. When she finally emerged, her face was pale and her hands shook. "It's too much," she whispered. "The simulator puts you through human memories. I lived through their wars. I felt what it was like to kill someone, to watch friends die, to be so afraid you can barely breathe but you still have to fight because if you don't, everyone dies." Taman helped her to a chair. "Do you want to stop?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then she shook her head. "No, because now I understand why we have to learn this. The Devourer won't show mercy. It won't negotiate. If we don't fight, everyone dies anyway. At least this way we have a chance." Across Valtech space, millions were having the same realization. The volunteers who signed up were being transported to Sol in waves, thousands at a time. They came from all 17 homeworlds, representing every culture and philosophy in the Confederation. And they all had to face the same brutal truth. Peace was beautiful, but it was also a luxury that required strength to maintain. Yunji was one of the volunteers. She was a researcher, someone who'd spent her life studying ancient literature and poetry. She had never hurt anyone, never even considered violence. But she signed up because her daughter asked her to. "Mom," the girl had said, "if you don't go, who will protect me?" Now Eunji sat in a classroom on Mercury, listening to Jiwon explain the philosophy of war. The AI didn't glorify violence. Instead, she talked about proportion, about restraint, about the terrible responsibility of holding power. Humanity learned through bitter experience, Jiwon said, her holographic form pacing in front of the class. "We learned that violence is sometimes necessary, but it should never be casual. Never easy. Never the first choice. The moment you start enjoying it, the moment it becomes simple, that's when you become the monster you're fighting against." She brought up images of human history. Wars fought for good reasons and bad. Victories that felt hollow. Defeats that taught wisdom. The whole bloody, complicated mess of a species learning how to be both strong and good. "We made mistakes," Jiwon continued. "Terrible ones. We hurt people who didn't deserve it. We let fear turn us cruel. But we learned. And we built these safeguards into every system. Every weapon requires moral approval from a living consciousness. Every ship has protocols that prevent indiscriminate destruction. We made it hard to kill because killing should be hard." Yunji raised her hand. "What if we're not strong enough? Not just physically, but mentally, morally. What if we fail?" Jiwon looked at her with something that might have been respect. "Then you fail as yourselves, not as pale imitations of humanity. We don't want you to become us. We want you to stay you, but with the tools to survive. The strength to fight when you must and the wisdom to stop when you can." Back on the council, Ara finally made her decision. She called an emergency session and stood before all the representatives. "I've been wrong," she said simply. "I wanted to run because I was afraid of what fighting would do to us. Afraid we'd lose ourselves. But I've been reading the human archives, and I found something interesting." She brought up a quote. Words written by a human philosopher thousands of years before they transcended. The quote says, "The true test of civilization is not whether we can make war, but whether we can refuse to do so when it would benefit us, and choose to fight only when protecting others." I think humanity passed that test. They built weapons powerful enough to conquer the galaxy, then chose to walk away and leave them for us. For strangers, for people they'd never meet. That's not the action of warmongers. That's the action of guardians. She paused, letting the words sink in. We won't become monsters by learning to fight. We'll become monsters only if we forget why we're fighting. So I'm changing my vote. We stay, we learn. We become what we need to be. The vote was unanimous. Training intensified. The Sol system transformed into the largest military academy in galactic history. Hyunwoo was one of the civilian pilots who showed exceptional talent. He'd been a cargo hauler before, flying supplies between stations. Now he was learning to pilot a dreadnought, a ship so massive it had its own gravity. His instructor was Ji-won herself, or rather, a copy of her subroutines designed specifically for teaching. She was patient but demanding, pushing him to understand not just how the ship worked but why it was built that way. Humans were terrified of their own weapons, she explained during one session. So they built in delays, cooling periods, requirements for multiple confirmations before firing the most destructive armaments. It makes the ship slightly less efficient in combat, but it prevents accidents, prevents rage from overriding judgment. Hyunwoo nodded, his hands moving over controls that felt increasingly natural. It's like they didn't trust themselves. Exactly. And that lack of trust, that healthy fear of their own power, is what made them trustworthy. Ironic, isn't it? On Earth, Soman led a team of engineers studying the manufacturing facilities. She was brilliant, creative, always looking for ways to improve existing designs, and she found something remarkable. The humans left gaps in their technology, she told Taemin during a briefing. Deliberate ones. Places where they knew they'd reached their limits, but they left notes suggesting other approaches. It's like they were inviting us to innovate, to add our own solutions. Can we do it? Taemin asked. Can we improve on half-million-year-old technology? Soman grinned. We already have. I've figured out how to integrate our energy shielding with their weapon systems. It makes the ships 30% more efficient. And I think we can do more. The humans were brilliant, but they weren't perfect. They left room for the next generation to be better. The months passed faster than anyone expected. The Valthek learned. They trained. They transformed. Not into humans, but into something new. A peaceful species that understood violence. A gentle people who could be terrible when necessary. And through it all, Ji-won watched with something very much like pride. She was an AI, incapable of true emotion according to her programming. But 500,000 years of waiting had taught her something humanity never intended. She'd learned to hope. 3 weeks before the Devourer's arrival, the final test began. The entire fleet would conduct live fire exercises, coordinating attacks against simulated targets in deep space. 20 million Valthek, working together, wielding the most powerful weapons ever created. The test went perfectly, too perfectly, and that's when long-range sensors detected the horrible truth. The Devourer was bigger than expected, much bigger. The entity had grown, feeding on the consumed galaxy, swelling to unimaginable size. The Armada might not be enough. Taemin read the reports and felt fear settle into his bones. But he also felt something else. Determination. Humanity had believed in them, had waited 500,000 years, trusting that someone would come, someone would be worthy. The Valthek would prove that trust wasn't misplaced, or they would die trying. The Confederation Council didn't believe Taemin at first. They thought he'd gone mad, that the isolation of deep space had broken something in his mind. But then the data arrived. Thousands of scans, videos of the awakening facilities, readings of power sources that shouldn't exist, and finally, a message directly from the Human Defense Network itself. The hologram that appeared in the council chambers was different from the one Taemin had seen. This one took the form of a woman, tall and confident, wearing what the historical database identified as a human military uniform. She looked real enough to touch, but everyone knew she was just light and code. I am Tactical Overseer Ji-won, the hologram said in perfect Valthek. Her voice was calm, patient, like a teacher addressing students. I am an artificial intelligence created by humanity to maintain their final defense network. I have been waiting for 500,000 years. I will now explain why. The council chamber fell silent. 17 species, hundreds of representatives, all frozen in shock. Ara, the head counselor, found her voice first. You claim to represent humanity, but humanity died 500,000 years ago. No, Ji-won said simply. We evolved. We transcended physical form and moved to a higher plane of existence. But before we left, we detected something in deep space. Something old and terrible. We called it the Devourer. The hologram changed, showing images of deep space. But these weren't normal stars and galaxies. Something dark was moving through the cosmos. A tear in reality itself. Where it passed, stars went dark. Planets crumbled to nothing. Entire solar systems simply ceased to exist. The Devourer awakens every few million years, Jiwan continued. It feeds on life, on thought, on consciousness itself. It cannot be reasoned with or stopped by conventional means. It simply consumes. We detected it moving through a distant galaxy. Our calculations showed it would eventually reach this region of space. So we built a weapon to stop it. The Armada, Taman said from his seat. Yes, 10 million warships, weapons that can tear apart planets, manufacturing facilities that can build 1,000 ships a day, defensive stations that can shield entire star systems, and all of it hidden, waiting, until the next intelligent species evolved enough to use it. Doyun, the Confederation's military commander, stood up. He was old by Valthek standards, his skin marked with the scars of a dozen different peacekeeping missions. Why give us weapons? Why not fight this thing yourselves? We no longer exist in a form that can interact with physical reality, G1 explained. We can observe, but we cannot act. And we chose not to leave our weapons active without supervision. A fleet this powerful, running on automatic, could become the very evil it was meant to stop. So we designed the systems to require living operators, beings with choice, with morality, with the ability to say no. This is insane, Ara said, but her voice lacked conviction. We're a peaceful civilization. We've never fought a war. We don't even have a real military, just peacekeepers and defense forces. I know, Jiwan said, and for the first time something like sympathy crossed her digital face. That's exactly why humanity chose to help you. You're peaceful because you've never faced true evil, but the Devourer is coming and peace will not save you. Only strength will. Only the willingness to fight for what you love. She brought up new images, scans from the Defense Network's long-range sensors. The Devourer was visible now, a massive darkness spreading across the far edge of the galaxy. Already it had consumed hundreds of star systems, thousands of worlds. The network's calculations showed its path clearly. It was heading straight for Valthek space. Estimated time of arrival, G1 said, is 11 months. The council erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted in a dozen languages. Some demanded evacuation. Others called for more information. A few simply sat in stunned silence, unable to process the enormity of what they'd learned. Taman watched them argue for hours. Finally, he stood up and spoke loud enough to cut through the noise. We don't have time for this. G1, what do we need to do? The AI turned to face him. You need to learn how to use the Armada. Humanity left training programs, simulations, educational protocols. Everything you need to become warriors. But it won't be easy. The process is painful. Many will fail, and even those who succeed will carry the weight of it for the rest of their lives. How many people do we need? Asked Doyun. The full fleet requires 12 million operators. Pilots, gunners, engineers, tactical officers, navigators, plus support staff, logistics coordinators, medical personnel. In total, you'll need to recruit and train approximately 20 million Valthek. 20 million, out of a total Confederation population of 2 billion. 1% of every living soul, and if we refuse? Ara asked quietly. If we choose to evacuate instead? Run to another galaxy? Jiwan's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes grew colder. The Devourer travels faster than your ships. It would reach your evacuation fleet within 5 years, and even if you escaped, you would doom every other species in this galaxy. Everyone who cannot run fast enough. Everyone who hasn't evolved space travel yet. Billions of potential lives ended because you chose to flee. The weight of that settled over the council like a heavy blanket. Back in the Sol system, Taman and his crew explored more of the awakened facilities. Each one revealed new wonders and new terrors. Ships the size of cities, weapons that could create black holes, factories that broke down matter at the atomic level and reassembled it into anything needed. Minho found something that changed everything. Deep in an archive on one of Earth's dead continents, preserved in a vault that had kept it safe for 500,000 years, was a message. Not from the AI, but from actual humans. Their last words before they transcended. The crew gathered around as Minho played the recording. The hologram showed a human, actually human, standing in what looked like a garden. She was old, her hair white, her face lined with age, but her eyes were kind. If you're seeing this, she said, then the Devourer has been detected and you need our help. I want you to know something important. We didn't build this Armada because we were warriors. We built it because we were afraid. Afraid of becoming monsters ourselves. Afraid that our power would corrupt us. Afraid that we'd use our weapons not to protect but to conquer. She smiled sadly. So we made a choice. We would transcend, leave physical form behind, but first we would build a gift. Not weapons for war's sake, but tools for those who might need them. We designed every system to require conscious choice, moral judgment, living compassion. Because the greatest weapon isn't the one that destroys most efficiently. It's the one that's never used because its mere existence prevents the need. The human paused, looking directly into the camera, as if she could see across 500,000 years. I know you're afraid. I know you don't think you can do this. But we believe in you. We believed in you before you even existed. That's why we waited. That's why we built this place. You can do this. You must do this. Not because it's easy, but because it's right. Good luck, children of the future. Make us proud. The recording ended. Hana was crying. Mino looked thoughtful. Taemin felt something shift inside himself. Something he couldn't quite name. It felt like responsibility. Like purpose. Jiwan, he said to the air, knowing the AI was listening. Tell the council we'll do it. Tell them the Luminous Accord crew volunteers for the training program. And tell them they should too, because that human was right. This isn't about being warriors. It's about being guardians. Throughout Valthek space, the message spread. Volunteers began signing up. Millions of them. Civilians who'd never held a weapon. Scientists who'd spent their lives studying peace. Artists and teachers and farmers. All of them stepping forward because someone, 500,000 years ago, had believed they could. The awakening wasn't just about ships and weapons. It was about a sleeping civilization, discovering it had the strength to stand against darkness. And that discovery terrified and inspired them in equal measure. The stars looked different in this part of space. Taemin had been traveling through the galaxy for 20 years, but something about the Sol system made his skin crawl. It was too quiet, too empty, like a graveyard that nobody visited anymore. His ship, the Luminous Accord, drifted slowly past the orbit of Mars. The red planet looked dead and cold beneath them. Behind him, his crew worked silently at their stations. They were all nervous. Everyone knew the stories about this place. 500,000 years ago, a species called humans had lived here. They built cities and machines. They launched themselves into space. Then one day they simply vanished. No bodies, no signs of war or disease, just empty buildings and silent machines that eventually crumbled to dust. The Valthek Confederation had marked this system as a historical site, nothing more. A reminder that even civilizations could die. Taemin didn't believe in ghosts. But if he did, this would be where they lived. Commander, I'm getting strange readings from the asteroid belt, Hana said from her station. She was young, barely 3 years out of the academy. Her fingers moved quickly across the holographic display in front of her. There's something metallic out there. Something big. Taemin walked over to her station and looked at the screen. The readings didn't make sense. The asteroids in this belt should be rock and ice, maybe some iron deposits. But these signatures showed refined metals, organized structures and power sources that were dormant but still present. How big are we talking? He asked. Hana's eyes widened as she ran the calculations again. Commander, one of these asteroids has been completely hollowed out. The cavity inside is the size of a small moon. And it's not natural. Someone built this. The crew fell silent. Everyone turned to look at Taemin. He felt the weight of their stares. Protocol said they should report this and leave. Let the archaeological teams handle it. But something in his gut told him this was important. Maybe the most important discovery in Valthek history. Take us closer, he said quietly. Slowly, the Luminous Accord turned and headed toward the asteroid belt. As they got closer, the sensors picked up more and more anomalies. Not just one hollow asteroid, but hundreds, maybe thousands, each one containing something that the scanners couldn't quite identify. They approached the first asteroid carefully. It was gray and pitted, looking like any other space rock. But the sensors showed the truth. Inside was a massive chamber, and inside that chamber were ships. Lots of ships. I'm sending a probe inside, Hana said. Her hands shook slightly as she controlled the small drone. It slipped through a hidden opening in the asteroid's surface and entered the darkness within. The probe's lights came on and the entire crew gasped. The chamber was enormous. Artificial lights flickered to life as the probe entered, responding to its presence. And there, lined up in perfect rows, were warships. Hundreds of them. Each one was at least 1 kilometer long, built from metals that gleamed despite 500,000 years of sitting in darkness. They looked brand new, not a scratch on them. Not a single sign of age or decay. "This isn't possible," whispered Minho, the ship's archaeologist. He was an older man, gray-haired and usually calm. Now his voice trembled. "Nothing survives that long. Metal corrodes. Systems break down. These ships should be dust by now." But they weren't dust. They were perfect. Taman made a decision that he knew might end his career. "Prepare a boarding team. We're going inside." 2 hours later, Taman, Minho, and Hana stood inside the asteroid chamber wearing environmental suits. The air here was breathable, somehow still fresh after 500 millennia. The temperature was controlled. Everything worked. They walked toward the nearest ship. Up close, it was even more impressive. The hull was smooth, marked with symbols that might have been writing. Minho recorded everything, his scientific mind trying to process the impossible. "Look at the design," he muttered. "It's built for war. These are weapons ports. This is armor plating. The humans built warships." "I thought humans were a primitive species," Hana said. "The records say they barely made it off their planet before they disappeared." "The records are wrong," Taman said simply. They found an entrance, a doorway that opened at their approach. Inside, the ship was even stranger. The corridors were sized for creatures about the same height as Valtech. The control systems looked functional, and everywhere there were weapons. Weapon lockers. Ammunition storage. Armories that could supply an army. Minho touched a control panel and something happened. The ship came alive. Lights flooded the corridors. Systems hummed to life, and then a hologram appeared in front of them. A shimmering blue image of symbols and patterns that meant nothing to the Valtech. The hologram spoke in a language they didn't understand. It cycled through hundreds of different sounds, different words, as if searching for something the visitors would recognize. Finally, it began displaying mathematical equations, numbers, the universal language. Minho worked quickly, using his translator to interpret the mathematics. Slowly, a message formed. "Protocol Eternal Guardian. Active," he read aloud. "Threat assessment in progress. Scanning for authorized personnel. No authorization found. Initiating cascade activation sequence. All defense networks will be operational in 72 hours. "What does that mean?" Hana asked, her voice rising with panic. The answer came faster than any of them expected. Through the asteroid's opening, they could see space. And in that space, lights were coming on. First one, then 10, then hundreds, then thousands. All across the asteroid belt, the hidden facilities were waking up. Moons that had seemed natural were cracking open to reveal shipyards inside. Stations hidden in Jupiter's clouds were powering up. Even Mars, dead Mars, showed signs of massive structures beneath its surface activating after 500,000 years of sleep. The entire Sol system was coming alive. Taman grabbed his communicator. "Luminous Accord, this is the commander. We need to leave now." But when they tried to return to their ship, something stopped them. An invisible wall, a barrier of pure energy that surrounded the entire system. They were trapped. The hologram changed. New symbols appeared, and this time they formed words in the Valtech language. The system had learned their speech just from listening to them talk. "Welcome, inheritors," the message read. "We are humanity's final gift to the universe. We are the shield left behind. We are what stands between you and the darkness that comes. We are waking now because the threat has been detected. The devourer approaches. You have 11 months to prepare. We will teach you how to fight. We must. Because if you do not learn, all life in this galaxy will end. This is our promise made 500,000 years ago. This is our duty, even in death. Let the training begin." Taman read the message 3 times. Each time it seemed more impossible, more terrifying. "Get me a direct link to the Confederation Council," he said quietly. "Tell them everything has changed. Tell them humanity isn't dead. They've just been waiting. And tell them we're about to go to war.